Well, you can consider, putting something, into the DMZ. So, that might work if you only have one level of router or firewall in between.
Well, I don't really need that because on the first layer, it forwards properly, no issue right there. It goes right to the second router, and I can see when I do a log on the port, I can see the requests coming in on the second router.
Okay. Well,
I know it's coming in. I'm just trying to figure out one way to internally jump from one port to another port, an internal port, and send to a manually set up multicast IP address. Since the internal address 255 is just disabling Tomato. So I have to, and the 254 is because I have sharing the same IP address range. So it's 192.168.1.1 for the ACES and 254 for the AT&T one.
Increase your volume further. You may have to adjust the level on each speaker.
I'm trying something, something new today.
And then try.
We have direct audio device. Let's try that one and see if it hooks up to the microphone. Nope, it's not connecting to the microphone. Okay.
That was to play back your recording.
Yeah. Are you able to? Nope. Try again. Okay, it's only presenting me with 2 devices.
Well, the other one gives you the chips.
Well, this one is working. So our usual, screen recording mechanism is working. However, with this one, it's not working yet. It's not. It's failing to detect the audio device that needs to be connected to it. We tried this. We can try this one. I don't think it's going to work either. Let's do record. Nope, it's not. It's not picking up anything.
Was this program started before you plugged in the mic?
Nope. It was started after I plugged in the mic. So now let's see. Let's see if I do this. Make this the default device. Will the other program pick it up? Okay, let's try that. Nope. Doesn't look like it's gonna pick it up.
Welcome to the audio setup wizard. This wizard will help you set the optimum levels for both your microphone and speaker.
Okay. Okay. It looks like it's picking up this time. Just have to set it as the default device. Stuff. All right. So let's get started here. This is a new, recording interface. I'm using this. Let me see if I started the recording yet. And talk video. Share the entire desktop. Hi, Stacy, can you hear me? We should be transmitting. If I started the recording yet.
What does the video do when you click on it? Right below.
No video source. Okay, I think that's it. Hi Stacy, can you hear me now? All right, great, thank you. Lots of white noise. Okay, see if I can change that by lowering the microphone. Is that working out better? Maybe a bit. Okay. Okay. So let's see if this works with you, Stacy. If it doesn't work well, it's okay not to have this class captioned. This is for the most part a test of the equipment, and also just to see whether this mechanism works or not. Oh, just lost my audio. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so I think we'll be okay. All right. Thank you, Stacy. All right. So what we'll do today is I'm doing a dual recording. So I'm going to use my usual recording mechanism, which does not have captioning, and then also the other mechanism through CCC Confer that actually has closed captioning. But other than that, we'll use the same type of we'll teach the class pretty much the same way.
Class seems brighter today.
Yeah, I forgot to turn off one of the lights. Thank you, Kristen. All right. So what we'll do today is we will continue to work on the program that we started on Monday. Yes, go ahead.
What was the phrase for TACnet Wi-Fi network?
The passphrase?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to write it down because we are actually getting recorded right now. It's that.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, so what we'll do today is continue with the program that we started on the other day, and we worked on it in Eclipse. The purpose of this demonstration is so that you can basically replicate the process to work on your project. Your project is the H2O molecule model that we have already talked about. The homework assignment is not assigned yet, so there's no deadline to get it done. But you might want to kind of parallel or shadow what I have been doing in this class, so that way you have a chance to practice all of that stuff that we have been doing. Okay, last time when we are done, this is the only part that we have done up to this point, as far as what we did on the other day on Monday. We used the random number generator to make a random choice, so that when we play rock paper scissors, the computer knows okay, I can make a choice, and let me see if I'm winning or losing. So that's where we stopped last time. Do we have any questions about what we worked on Monday? No questions? Okay. If there are no questions, what we'll do today is we'll continue to work on this, and there are several things that we can work on right now at this point. We are going back to the source files, and you can see in the source files we have choices as a enum type. It has its own file. We can now add another enum type for the states. Okay, in other words, we're going to use some enum types to indicate the state of the state machine. So this way we can keep track of which state are we in at any particular time. So what we'll do is we'll do a right click and do a new enum, and this time we'll name the enum machine state. And now we have to define the actual states. There are several states. Remember last time we actually had a diagram to show you the states. The first state is the initial state, and the last state is the final state. In between we have, let's see, 3 additional states. One is there are no winners. In other words, the game has not, there's no determination of who is winning the game. There's one for the application winning, and there's one for the user winning. So what we'll do here is to describe those states. We can always, add initial state too. Okay, even if we're not going to use it, it's still okay to add the initial state here. The final state. Then we have the intermediate states in between. We have no winner as one state. We have the app wins as one state, and then we have the app or user wins as the other case. So now we have all these states, represented by this enumerated type called machine state. Now this is going to be useful because we want this not to be defined inside the model, because it will be usable from the perspective of the view as well. Because the view needs to know, what state am I transitioning into, and that's why the view needs to know about this too. Okay. So now we are ready to go back to the RPS model file and continue with the logic inside the model. At this point, I have not touched a single thing about the user interface because it's not quite time to do that yet. I'm going to finish up the business logic of this application first, and then we can move on and see, okay, how do we interact with the end user? Are there any questions at this point? There are no questions? All right. So if there are no questions at this point, we'll go ahead and finish up the logic of what do we do when the user has made a choice, okay? Rock, paper, scissors. And how are we going to determine, what is going to be the next state? That's going to be, what we'll be talking about here. There are several ways to do it. For those of you who like, switch statements, you can use a nested switch statement for this purpose. For those of you who like, if then else or conditional statements, you can use conditional statements for this purpose as well. So this is entirely up to you to decide, how you want to determine, what would be the next state. When the user chooses, what state, should I be in at this point? To have the user choose trigger. If you remember from the previous class, what kind of, okay, the user choose trigger only goes into a particular state, or it only goes out of a particular state. Which state am I going out of?
No winner.
No winner, okay? So we know that at this time, we're already in the no winner state. So we'll go ahead and make that assumption. So the switch statement is only going to switch based on the user choice. So in this case, we say, switch choice, and then we now, specify the cases inside the switch statement. And choice is a enum type itself. We can go back to choices to find out, what the choices are. So we have rock, paper, scissors as the actual choices. And now we go back to the model and say case rock. And I'm just going to do the usual framework first, and then we'll fill in the content. Rock, paper, scissors. Okay. And if you want to catch, a mistake, case, like, you can always have a default to basically say, what if it is not one of these three? In this case, in this particular sample program, I'm not going to put in all the extra checking. I'll just kind of focus on the logic of playing rock, paper, scissors in this case. All right. If I end up here, what does it mean? It means the user has made a choice of rock. Okay, so the user has done this. So now it's time to compare the choice that was made by the user, represented by the choice variable, to the choice that the application has made in the call or in the method app makes choice. Okay. When you look at app makes choice, which is defined up here, we have app's choice as its own variable inside this object here. And now we can do the comparison and determine, okay, who is winning in this case, or is this a draw? You can, once again, you can use a conditional statement, or you can use a nested switch statement to deal with this. Now, how you want to deal with it is entirely up to you. Okay, in your application, some people like nested, switch statements, and some people like conditional statements. It depends a lot on, what you need to do. But what I'll do is I'm going to use another switch statement here. Switch, and then inside the switch we have, I cannot remember the name of the variable. It's app's choice. So app's choice is here. And now we have, the case statements. The case statements, there are 3 again, because, the application could have chosen rock. The application could have chosen paper. And the application could have chosen scissors. Are we doing okay so far as the structure of the code is concerned? The outer switch statement has to do with the choice made by the user. The inner switch statement has to do with the choice made by the application itself. Okay. So when I get into this part here, it corresponds to having the user made a choice of rock, and the application also made a choice of rock. So that means there's no need to do any state change because it is still in a no-winner state. We are remaining in a no-winner state. So there's no change, but if you really want to insist, on, an assignment statement, we can, just go ahead and reassign the state here. So that means, we need one more variable here, which is a private variable. In this case, it is of the type machine state, and we'll just call it state here. And right here, we're going to, say, our current state is, no winner, which is the state that it should be in at this point to begin with. I might have no winner state. I think it's double check. No winner. That's it. No winner.
Maybe you need to save it.
Yeah, need to save all the files and then go back to this model here. No winner cannot resolve to a variable.
Type state dot.
But it should be able to resolve it because I have already imported
Well, you just
machine state.
I'm thinking it's just because you're just calling no winner of practically nowhere.
I think that works as well. If you just name the type, that will work also. Okay. What if the application makes a choice of paper? Who's winning?
Application.
The application is winning because the application chose paper and the end user chose rock. So let's go ahead and say, in this case, state gets machine state dot app wins. And then this one, would be the other way around. So in this case, state equals to machine state dot user wins. There we go. Are there any questions about this application up to this point? No questions? Okay. Now the other thing that we might want to do is to keep track of the state and see whether there really is a change or not. Okay? Because if there's no state change, we may not want to let the listener adapter know and say, hey, somebody might want to know about this. So it's, we'll decide how to deal with that later. But now we have to finish up the logic of this game, which means, I'm going to do something that I really do not like doing, which is copying and pasting. So in this case, I'm copying and pasting, but I have to change the states. Because if the application is choosing rock and the end user is choosing paper, then in this case, the end user is winning the game. If they both choose paper, then this is a no winner. It remains in the no winner state. And in this case, we have the application winning because the application is choosing scissors when the end user is choosing paper. And then we have one more time, one more embedded switch statement. and we put it into this case here. In this case, the application is choosing rock, the end user is choosing scissors. So this means the application wins in the first case, the application loses in the first case. So that means the end user, the user wins in the second case. User wins. And then for the last one, they chose scissors. Both parties chose scissors. So this one, for this one, there are no winners. Right. So are there any questions about handling the state machine itself? No questions? All right. Now, depending on the outcome of the states, we have a counter to keep track of who has won how many times. So now, instead of having this switch statement to keep track of who's winning and incrementing the counter, we can do everything outside here. In other words, what we can do outside of the outside conditional, the switch statement, is we can have a conditional statement. So in this conditional statement, we can say if the current state, if the next state is machine state dot user wins, then we are going to update one of my local variables, one of the variables inside this particular object. And let's check the name of that variable. If the user is winning, we have the increment user win counter. So in this case, we increment that counter, plus user win counter. Is that okay so far? Any questions about this part? Now this is business logic, right? This is the business logic of playing rock, paper, scissors, at least as far as this game is concerned. If this is not the case, and I'm using a really bad construct here, because we can now say else if state equals machine state dot app wins. So in this case, we want to increment the other counter. So this time we want to increment user. Let me double check the user lose counter. So that we are incrementing the number of times that the user has lost the game. Like so. Are there any questions about the logic up to this point? The big switch statement is only there to determine who's winning and who's losing, and then we have a conditional statement outside of the switch statement to increment the appropriate counter. If the current state is still no winner, then neither of these counters are getting incremented because we are not nobody is winning. But we do have another counter to increment in that case because we have a game counter that has to be incremented for each game anyway. So that means we cannot do it inside the conditional statement, not even as the else part. We just have to increment game counter outside of the conditional statement altogether, because this counter has to be incremented for each time the user makes a move. Are there any questions about the logic of the business model? Questions? All right. If there are no questions, the next question is, well, everything is good here. Okay, so let me just kind of recap what we have done so far in today's class. We have implemented the logic to determine who's winning and who's losing based on the choices, one choice made by the user and one choice made by the application. But everything that we have done up to this point, they are completely internal to the model. In other words, nobody is going to know about this, okay, even if there's a state change. Even if the user wins or the user loses, there's no state change. Nobody knows about it. So we need to let the listener adapter know about the state change if there's a state change and say, okay, what do you want to do now? The other thing is, do we want to let the listener know even when there's no state change? In other words, we're transitioning back to the no winner state. Now, if you remember from the state diagram last time,
we did have a transition back to itself. No winner can go back to itself, which means it is a useful transition, and that means the listener adapter needs to know about it as well. Okay.
And if we look at the listener adapter, it has not been defined yet. So now is a good time to define what a listener adapter needs to be able to do. One of the things it has to do is to get notified of a state change in the model. So we'll just go ahead and add public void state change. And we also want to determine, do we want a parameter with state change? Once again, there are several ways to approach this particular question. We can have one state change method for each possible state. In other words, when we are transitioning into no winner, we can say state change to no winner, and then we have another method of state change into user loses or user wins. So that's one way to approach this problem. The other way to approach this is to parameterize the method so that we can include machine state type as our parameter. So that way we can pass it as a parameter. I'm going to use that approach here. So machine state is a parameter to state change as a method. Now that we have listener adapter being able to do this, let's switch back to the model. The model already has a listener adapter, which is also called listener adapter here. So what we need to do is at the very end of this logic, we are going to invoke that method. In other words, we are going to say listener adapter dot, and you can see we have a state change here. And then the state change here is going to use my own state as the new state. So this is the only way to let the outside world know about the state change inside the game itself. And right here we have several questions. Okay, first of all, whoever is listening to the state change of this state machine now can be notified and say, okay, we have just changed state. The question now is, do we need to send any additional information to the listener adapter? Now, what type of extra information are we talking about? The counters, okay? The win counter, the lose counter, and so on. Okay, let's just say that for the time being, we are not interested in that. Okay, we'll keep it as simple as possible, and then we make changes later on when it is necessary. So once again, what type of development model am I using here? Am I using the agile development model, or am I using the waterfall development model? If you have to choose one or the other, which one am I using right now? We're using agile right now because I'm not predetermining everything and say, okay, now it is set in stone and we cannot change anything. Instead, it's really fluid. Okay, I'm just saying at this point we're just going to do something as simple as possible. When we do need to extend it, then we'll figure out how to do it. Okay. All right. So at this point, we are almost done. We have to kind of think about all the transitions that we were documenting on Monday and see that, okay, have we handled all of the transitions? And the answer is no, not quite yet, right? Because we also have to handle the case of, what if the end user is pressing the back button and say, I want to back out of this entire game. That was one of the things that we have to handle. And then the other thing is, once we have determined that the user has won or has lost, what are we going to do next? Do you guys remember that we have to handle that case too? We are going to give the user a choice to go back and start the game again. Okay, so we need to handle that. And that means, in the model interface, we have to look at this again. We have just handled this particular transition. This one is just initializing everything. We have to go ahead and initialize the counter again. This is the transition or the trigger that we have not handled yet. It's called play again. So let's go ahead and go to RPS model and implement play again. Play again is already down here. All right.
So what do you think we need to do, for this particular trigger? Or at least, what state should I be in at this point?
No winner.
We should be in either user wins or app wins in order to have this trigger to be useful. Is that making any sense? Okay, so that means, if I don't want, I'm not going to do it here, but you might want to check. Okay, so might want to check that we are not. Well, we are in the user wins or app wins states. Okay. In most programming languages, including Java and C++, they usually have a method called assert, A-S-S-E-R-T, to basically say, I want this expression to be true. If it is not true, throw an exception and get all the way out of the program. Okay. Let me just do a quick search here to see whether Java has that feature already. Java assert. Assertion in Java. Nope. Programming with assertions. Okay, that's probably better. Okay, the assert statement has two forms. The first form is simpler, which is assert expression 1. The second form is assertion expression 1, expression 2. Expression 1 is a Boolean. Expression 2 has a value that is going to be printed, I suppose, when it is going to happen. So we'll go ahead and just use assert, in the simplest form. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do it here. So we say assert, and then the condition that has to be true at this point. The condition that has to be true at this point is my current state has to be equal to state dot app wins, or my current state has to be the user is winning. The user just won, basically. Okay. Now let me just kind of talk a little bit about what assert is going to do. The expression to the right-hand side of assert is just a condition in this case. In other words, it's really just something that returns a Boolean type, either true or false. What assert does is if that condition is false by the time we get to this line, it will automatically throw an exception. Now, throwing an exception is a kind of more advanced topic in object-oriented programming, but what you can see it as is really just an emergency exit. Okay. In other words, if state does not equal to apps wins or user wins at this point, and I'm triggering, play again, that will cause the program to quote-unquote bomb out. Okay, but it's not really bombing out. It's actually a planned emergency exit to basically say the program should not be in this state at this point. So something is wrong, and it might even report the line number of the program and say, okay, we have a problem here, and it will give you a backtrace of the entire program in a normal Java program. In an Android program, it cannot print it to the screen. Instead, if you look at logcat, that will probably reflect, the issue that it is reporting. But at any rate, it is a particular way to make sure that your program, the program can check its own sanity. Okay, am I making any sense here? Okay, the program can basically say, am I insane? Am I crazy to get to this point and have, the current state not being app wins or user wins? Well, if I'm insane, I should stop doing anything further from this point. That's basically, it's a self-checking mechanism. Is that okay? All right. Now, assuming that the assert statement does not throw an exception and get all the way out, now we need to do something about the play again, because what do you think play again is supposed to do? It should change the state to no winner, exactly. So now we have to say, the current state goes back to state dot no winner.
And we should also know, we should let the listener adapter know about this too. So now we say listener adapter dot state change, and the new state is going to be no winner, just like that. So whoever is listening to the model is now saying, oh, okay, you're just causing a state change. Now we're getting back to the no winner state. And then the views connected to the listener adapter will have to decide what they're going to do to update the screen when this transition happens. Are we still doing okay so far? Okay.
Shouldn't it be machine state?
Sorry?
In the conditional, like for the third, it should be state equals machine state.
You can use either way, because you can choose to use the name of the enum type or a variable already of that enum type. So either way works. In this case, I like to use this one, because state is already used on the other side of the comparison. So it makes a little bit more sense to me to use state dot something. But in the other cases, let me see. I think there are cases where, yeah. So these can also use state too. I'm just being inconsistent here.
What were the warnings?
What about the warnings?
Yeah. Yellow underline.
Okay, should be okay. In a static way, multiple markers on this line. The static field machine state dot apps dot underscore win should be accessed in a static way. Okay, I think it means if I change this to machine state, it will make that warning go away.
Yeah. Possibly because the type could change.
No, state has a static type here, so that cannot change. I think it's more of a. I think it's just conceptually, if it is static, you should refer to the name of the type. If it is non-static, then you have to refer to the name of the object.
I was just thinking that you could possibly change static from machine state to a different type, which does not include those that you've specified.
You mean changing state itself?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Java is a strongly typed programming language, so for the most part, you cannot change the type of an object, unless you cast it. But if you cast it, then it's all bets are off. But that does make the warnings go away. All right. So now we are done with play again, and I think there's one more method we have to think about. And they're all down here. Okay, one is back button pressed. In other words, when the user presses the back button, which can be in any particular state. If you remember from the picture, we have transitions using this trigger, back button pressed, from every single state, from all three states, and leading everyone to the final state. So what we need to do here is to say, do we have anything to clean up at this point? What do you think? Well, the first thing I might want to do is to do this. Okay, the state is now machine state dot final state. In other words, this is my destination state. I'm transitioning into the final state. And then the second thing that we want to do is, well, do we want to let the adapter listener to know about this? That the state machine is ready to go. Well, maybe we should. So we say listener adapter dot state change, and we report our new state, which is the final state. Okay. Say again?
Maybe reset the count.
No, not really. We are just ready to get out of the entire program, so the counter does not need to be reset in this case. But in initialize, we do have a few things to initialize. So if we go back to initialize, these are all initialized to 0, which is good. I don't think there's anything else to do in initialize. Well, there's one thing to do in initialize, because the state needs to be initialized here. So we have to initialize the machine state to no winner, because we are transitioning from the initial state to the first state here. All right. Are there any questions? Now initialize, because it is a trigger, it is going into a particular state. So in this case, we still need to use listener adapter dot state change, and report that we are now changing into the no winner state from the initial state. So if you want to make this truly complete, then the constructor of this entire thing, which I think is right here, is going to have to say the initial state is going to be machine state dot initial state. Okay. So when we first create this particular object, the state is in its initial state. Until initialize is called, it will stay in the initial state. But when the initialize trigger happens, then it will initialize itself, get all the counters initialized, and then get itself into the no winner state.
Wait, initial state.
Say again?
Wait, in the initialize method, you set state to no winner, right?
No, initialize only initializes the counters. So when you look at initialize, oh, I did. You specify that. Okay. Initialize goes to the no winner state. But initialize is called from the constructor. Oh, I see what the problem is. Because I'm mixing up these two with, okay. So that means I have to take these away from the initialize call, the method, and make another one just to initialize the counter. Because I don't want it to go to the no winner state initially. Is that making any sense? Okay. If I use copy and paste, which is something that I do not like to do, but to illustrate what needs to happen here, I really want to do something like this, and call listener adapter dot state change to my current state, which is just the initial state.
So in the initialize,
actually, this is because it's the constructor, I don't think it matters. So I really should not do this. Never mind. But I do have to initialize the state to the initial state because it is, it's information about the model itself that we are just starting out. There's nothing done at this point.
can you go back to initialize?
Absolutely. So if I go back to initialize, initialize has not changed. I'm keeping it the same way as before right here. So it is still, initialize is still going to initialize the counters. It is going to switch the state from the initial state to no winner. In other words, this is also a good time to do another assertion, because this can only happen or should only happen when the state is currently the initial state. So if this assertion fails, the program should stop right away and say, okay, I'm supposed to be in the initial state when the initialize trigger happens. So this would be a good guard condition and say, okay, did I get initialized correctly?
So now who is calling initialize?
Well, at this point, we don't know yet.
Previously, we had the constructor call initialize, right?
That is correct. And since the constructor is also, initializing the counters, we don't really need to do it here, but it doesn't, interfere either. So it's okay either way. Or we can also choose not to do this initialization here
and just leave it to the initialize method to do it. So that would be also okay as well. It will still get it done before we have to make use of the counters, so it's okay either way. We still doing okay so far? Okay, so let me ask you one question. Is there a way for me to test this program at this point? With some additional code. Okay? And how do we do it?
Return value.
By the value of user. Okay, the counters are tracked, but they're not used. We can use the debugger for one thing. Okay, we can use the debugger, set up breakpoints, so that we can use another class, just to trigger these things, one after another in a particular sequence, and then we can check using the debugger whether the counters get updated correctly, whether the state gets updated correctly or not. So we can actually test the model independent to the rest of this particular application. I'll just go ahead and illustrate, how to do this, just so that we know what it is about. Okay. So if I am going to test this program, I need to fix all the problems in this file first. So let me see whether I still have any actual problems. I should not have any problems at this point. The listener, there's no one to implement it. So we need a very dumb listener, to start with. Okay. So if I want a dumb listener, we can just use a class. I'm just debating, where to put all that logic. We can put it into main activity, just as a test method here, as a test library, and then we can go to resources, go to layout, and we just have a button for the time being for testing purposes. So we'll stash a button into the screen here, which we won't use any later on. It's really just for testing for the time being. So we go to the button, and we want to change the width to display the properties. So I'm going to change the ID of the button to button test. Okay. I was supposed to say yes to it. Change it one more time to here. Say yes. And I also want to change the text to test. So we'll say button test. Make it a new string. Okay, so now we have a single button called test, and its only job is to test whether the model itself is working properly or not. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and call the model, create the model directly, which is actually something that we want to avoid. But since we are just testing the model itself, we'll go ahead and do it this time, and later on we'll just delete this code because its only purpose is for testing this particular model. And then we go back to my main activity, and now we have to specify the handler of this particular button. Let's see if view is not already in here, so we'll go ahead and, well, we can do it either way. We can do it in one of two ways. Because what we can do is we can specify view as a type first, and then in here we can say go ahead and import it. Okay, it doesn't want to do that. Find view by ID. R.ID right-hand side of an assignment must be variable. Alright, so now we can specify set on click listener to the following. It's going to be new, and we have to use the on-click listener adapter as the type here. That means we have to remember to import that as well. And now we are in the anonymous class definition. The anonymous class, in the anonymous class definition, and there's something wrong with this ID. So let's see if the R dot
Did you save?
ah. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now we can specify the on-click method, which is public void on-click. And the parameter, if I remember correctly, is a view. And here we can attach, well, it's up to you. You can attach the entire logic here, which means we're going to create the model, call initialize, call all the triggers as if a user is interacting with the game, and then at the very last part of this, we can use the debugger to check whether the program is doing what it is supposed to. In other words, we can stash the entire test code here, which I probably won't do. I'll just go ahead and say, test model as a method call here, and then outside I'm going to use another method just to implement the testing part. This makes it a little bit more modular. Test model as a method is going to be private because nobody else needs to know anything about it, and we'll go ahead and implement it here. I keep using my own indentation method, which is not the standard in Java for some reason. All right, so now we are ready to write some code to actually test the model itself. Now, when you're testing the model, the first thing we have to do is to create the model object itself. So in this case, it's RPS model, and we'll just call the model M here, okay, just so that I don't have to type as much stuff. So M is going to be a reference to a RPS model. And then the first thing we have to do now is to do a new. So M gets new RPS model to get it initialized. And then the second thing we have to do is to deal with the listener adapter. Here we have a few choices. If you think that the model may have to run without a listener adapter, then you can also check whether it is already pointing to something before you make use of it. But that will kind of significantly increase the complexity of, or it makes it just kind of difficult to read. In other words, do we always want to initialize this particular field before we do anything else? Or do we want to be able to run the model without any listener adapter already initialized to this particular field? That's the question. What do you think? Okay, if we want to allow the model to run without a listener adapter, that means every time we refer to listener adapter, which is down here, we have to put a conditional statement around this statement, the statement next to this one here, so that we do not try to use listener adapter when no one is assigned as the listener adapter. It is okay, we can do it that way. But if we do it that way, we also have to kind of make sure that this is done throughout all the places too. Well, let me do it once just so that we know how to do it. Okay. Because what you can do here is to say if listener adapter equals to no or does not equal to no, then we can do the following. Because the null value is the initial value of any reference. So if I have not assigned anything to listener adapter, it will double check and say, okay, do we actually have a listener adapter? If not, don't even try to report it to anyone because nobody cares. Is that making any sense? Okay. But then I have to put this around all of the calls, of state change. So one way to do it is to, there are two ways to do it. One way to do it is to turn this into its own private method. Then we just call that method every time we have to notify and say, okay, here's a state change, notify the listeners. That's certainly one way to do it, which is probably the best way to do it because now we can abstract it and just say, well, we have a private method, notify listener adapter, and it's not going to take any parameters because the state is an implied parameter. So in here, then we use that logic and say if listener adapter does not equal to null. In C++, null is all in uppercase, but in Java it is in lowercase because it is considered pretty much a constant in Java. But it serves the same purpose. A pointer or a reference initially points to null, which means it's not pointing to anything. So if it is non-null, then we'll say listener adapter dot state change to state. Because state is a field of this particular object, so no matter which method I'm dealing with, it still has access to state. Any questions about this method called notify listener adapter? No questions? Okay. So that makes it very convenient because now I don't need to sprinkle this logic everywhere. Instead, I just need to invoke that particular method and say notify listener adapter. Yeah, okay, doesn't know how to do that. Did I misspell something? Notify listener. Oh, okay. Misspell. There we go. And then we'll do the same thing everywhere else. Okay, so everywhere we actually initially call listener adapter state change. Now we just say notify listener adapter. And another one here. Notify listener adapter. Here. That's it. All right. It's still complaining about something in this file. Oh, okay. Refresh, took care of that. All right. Okay, so getting back to here, the model is now ready to run because it does not even need to have a listener adapter initialized in order to run the model. When you run the model, you are basically simulating what kind of triggers can be sent to the model, and everything should start with a initialize. So we say RPS, M in this case, M dot initialize to get everything initialized. And then once we have everything initialized, we can actually quote unquote play the game in this case. So when you play the game, you are simulating the triggers that can go into the RPS model object. So what we need to do now is to simulate the user choosing something. So you can say user choose a particular choice. We can say choices dot rock. And that will cause a transition. Okay, that can potentially cause a transition. So at this point, I cannot really predict what the program is going to do because I don't know what the random number generator
is going to generate. In other words, I don't know what the application is going to choose. So I'm not really sure whether I'll be in the win state or the lose state, or whether it remains in the no winner state. So that means, the next thing I can do is really just to get out of the whole thing, which means I can use, back button pressed to get out of the whole thing. And that concludes, the one tiny little test of the model. But how do we know the model is actually doing what it is supposed to? Well, that part, you can use the debugger for that part. So we go back to RPS model, and then we put a breakpoint at every single one of these places where it is supposed to get to. So we can toggle a breakpoint here in initialize, because we invoke this method explicitly. We are also going to put a breakpoint here in user choose, because we intentionally get to this point. And then we also have to get one into back button pressed. Breakpoint here. And that's it. Okay, we are ready to test it. Once we're ready to test it, we'll have to start up a virtual device. If you truly want to debug this type of program, you probably want to provide another interface so you can actually inject the choice of the application itself. So that way you can say, okay, I'm making the application choose scissors, and I'm playing I'm pretending the user is picking rock, okay, and then you can check the actual logic of whether it's doing it right or not, without with deterministic type of characteristics. All right, so finally our our virtual machine is up, and when this is up, I can get rid of the manager itself and just switch back to the AVD, Android Virtual Device. All right, so we are ready to run the program. When you're ready to run the program using the debugger, you don't want to press this button, because when you press this button, it will run it at full speed without using the debugger. So you want to use debug instead. So we want to debug this program. It's an Android application. As we modify, save changes, yes.
Looks like it's running right now.
It should be running right now. So I click test. Okay, now that we have hit a breakpoint, Eclipse wants to tell me that it wants to switch to the debug perspective. It's basically we rearranges the different panels accordingly in order to look at in order to display more debug information than what we are seeing here. I do not find it particularly useful, especially for smaller, simpler programs. So I'm going to say no in this case. Do you want to open this perspective now? The answer is no. It is still going to work okay. So right now the breakpoint is on line 85 of rpsmodel.java. And the nice thing is, you can single step, but when you just hover the pointer over something, it also displays the value of that particular field in this case, which is really handy. I don't really need anything else at this point. So initialize is going to do it's the simple stuff here. Unless you really want to double check every single one of these, there's no need to do it. Okay, but if you want to single step through, you can see these particular buttons here. One is step return, step over, and step into. Step into only makes a difference when you are on a method call, then it will go into the method. Otherwise, for simple statements like this, whether you use step over or step into doesn't make any difference. So I can press this button or this button and it will work the same. In this case, the assert call, we can just step over, no problem. And then we initialize our state to no winner at this point. Now this time I want to step into notify listener adapter
just to make sure the conditional statement is working the way it is supposed to. Because listener adapter is supposed to be null at this point, and one hover over already shows me that it is, it has a value of null. So that means in this case it should skip over the content of the conditional statement, because the condition says I only want to perform the notification when listener adapter is not null, but it is null, so that means it should skip over. Just double checking. Let's go ahead and check. Yep, stepping over, not a problem. So now we can resume the execution of the program to the next breakpoint. Are we doing okay so far in terms of using the debug tool that I have been demonstrating up to this point? Okay. The debugger is really, really useful. If you're writing an application and it's not doing what it's supposed to, use the debugger. I would use the debugger sometimes just to check and make sure the program is doing what it is supposed to without any user interface. Because right now I have no user interface whatsoever to look at the internal state of the state machine, but using the debugger, I can accomplish the same thing. So are there any questions about this session up to this point? No questions? Okay. As far as an app programming class is concerned, I think what I'm showing here is as boring as it can possibly get, right? Where's the splashy part of the app? Nothing, right? There's no user interaction whatsoever. There's one button to trigger the test of the model, and that's it. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and resume execution, which means it will run at full speed until we get to the next breakpoint. Oops. No. App makes choice. Okay, that's correct. We are now in the subroutine or the method called user choose. So now we want to check our random number generator to see whether it is working correctly or not. So let's step into the subroutine and see whether it is going to do this correctly. So we want to check app's choice first. It is null. Oh, okay, so I need to do a new for this particular variable too. So this will probably fail because, yep. Oh, right. I think it should be failing. Let me check. Step over. What is my current state? Okay. It does do it correctly. So the initial value is null in. It is not an object. A enum is still not an object. There's no need to use a new operator on it. Notify listener adapter. We already know that one is going to work just fine. So we'll go ahead and resume execution. And it is supposed to stop somewhere. No. I take it back. We already in back button pressed. So the whole test procedure concluded. Let's do it again. Forgot about that. Let's test it again. Go back to here. We are back to initialize because we are recreating the entire object. So we know this part is going to work also. No problem. Okay, so we do want to debug this portion. We know app makes choice is going to work, so we'll step over this subroutine call, and then we'll take a look at the user choice in this case. The user choice is rock. Well, that's exactly what I asked it to do because I want to simulate the user picking rock. I also want to know what the app is choosing. The app is choosing scissors, so the user is going to win in this particular game. But let's check the nested switch statement just to make sure that it is doing what it is supposed to. App's choice is scissors, and the user is winning. That's exactly what it is supposed to do. If state equals user wins, then we want to increment the user counter, and that's also what we wanted to do. We increment the game counter, and then we call notify listener adapter again, exactly what it's supposed to do. So at this point, we can let it run at full speed. And now we are into the back button pressed subroutine. Now, just in case you think, oh, but how did we get here? How do we get to back button pressed? The bottom part of the screen shows you how we got here. If you look at this back trace here, it shows you, everything from the very beginning of the entire program. Now, obviously, some parts of this is not going to be very useful to you, so you might want to start with something that is, actually usable, or some code that you start here. So this is, main activity.onStart, and then we get to test model, and then in test model we have, back button pressed, and that's how we got here. In other words, it is showing you exactly how we got into this method from the very beginning of this entire application. This is also a very useful tool because sometimes you're in a subroutine, but there are multiple ways to call the subroutine. The question is, how did I get here? And this shows you exactly how we got here. Now at this point, I want to know what the current state is. The current state is is user wins. But I also want to know what is this. In other words, the other states of this particular machine. What is the counter? What are the counter values? You can actually go to the source file and hover over each and every one and see how the current state of all the fields, which comes in pretty handy. I mean, this is really quite handy and useful. Okay, so as far as I can tell, the program is doing what it is supposed to. Not that this is a validation of the program entirely, but at least gives me a kind of warm and fuzzy feeling that it is not entirely wrong either. Are we doing okay so far at this point? Now, if I am using a revision control software to keep track of the versions of the program, I would check it in right now. I would check it in and say that I have tested, which portion of the program is already tested at this point, and so I would keep a version of this program. In case I make some, stupid changes later on that breaks the entire program, at least I have a one point to restore to, or at least compare to, and say, well, I know that on Wednesday the program was still working to a certain point. How come it's not working at all at this point? Yep.
Does Eclipse have a built-in Git?
I'm pretty sure it has, it has integration with a revision control. I just have not used Eclipse well enough to know exactly how to do it. I would imagine it is in here. Yep. Go ahead.
What are the inputs and outputs if we have the graphical? If we have set up the graphical editing?
Okay. We are a few steps away from getting it to actually output onto the screen, because every output of the state machine is only done by one single access point to the outside world, which is using the listener adapter's state change method. Okay, so that means if you want any output, you have to first implement a particular listener adapter. You have to define a class that implements the interface that we call listener adapter. And then in there, you can then choose whatever you want to do to change the state and do whatever update you need to do on the screen. Okay. All right, so that's good. Okay, we have a pretty warm and fuzzy feeling that the program is working up to a certain point. And let me see if there's any. This patch, validate, profile run, compare to restore from local history. So I think it is somewhere around here. Android tool, translate. And the source. I'm almost 100% sure that Eclipse has a way to do it. I just don't know how to do it yet. If it has all these really nice tools to give me hints, of how to fix a problem, it must have an integration to a revision control software.
At the very least, a plugin.
Yeah, it probably is already here. It's just that I don't know where to find it. Okay. Now, failing that, we can still zip up the entire folder and name it accordingly. Okay. So this is what I want to do. Okay. What I want to do is actually to get out of Eclipse first. Okay. Now that this project is working up to a certain point. So what I want to do is to go back to here, and in Linux there's a command called pushd, which is kind of helpful. Pushd is push directory, which is kind of like cd, except you can use a popd to go back to the folder where you were from before. Is that making any sense? Yeah, it's really, really, really handy because if you use pushd, you can now pushd and go to whatever folder you want to get to. So let's say I want to go to my workspace folder to tar the file. So I look at here and I go, okay, RPS can use one backup at this point. So I'm going to use my usual tar command, which is tar czvf rps.tar.gz. But I'm not going to name it just rps.tar.gz. I'm going to use today's date too. So it's 2014 March 5th. And if you really want to be explicit, you can also use the time as a part of the file name. So this way, one look at the file name, you know when you created this tar file, and you can compare and say this is an earlier file, this is a later file, and so on. Relying on the date of the file itself is not reliable. Okay, because when you modify the file, if you touch the file for whatever reason, it's going to change the timestamp. So I usually do not use the timestamp of the file itself as a reliable way to say, okay, when did I create this file? Instead, I use the name of the file to kind of tell me, okay, when did I create this file? Well, it's 10:19 in the morning when I created this file, and just use RPS to specify the folder itself that I'm backing up. So now I have a tar file for RPS. It has it's relatively large. It's about how many megabytes? 1.4 megabytes, which is not too bad. 1.5 megabytes, which is okay.
And it looks like what we was asking for. There's team, share project, and that sets up a Git.
Okay. It's under team.
Right click on your project.
Okay.
Team and share project.
And share project. Okay.
So just configure Git repository.
All right. Very nice.
What does pushd do again?
Pushd? Oh, okay. This is what I'm gonna do. Now that I'm done with creating a tarball for my folder, which is one really crude way of backing up your project, but in a way it is also nice because now somebody else who wants to take a look at your project, that person does not need access to Git anymore because it's just one little tarball and you can unzip it on any computer to get back to all the source files. So in a way it's good, but in many ways it's also bad because it doesn't lend itself to comparing to different revisions. Okay, but now that I'm done with this step here, I want to go back and restart Eclipse so I can continue with my project. So this is what we can do, popd. Okay, so pushd is doing two things. Pushd is remembering where I was before and then change directory to where I tell it to change to. Popd is the reverse of that. Okay, it's saying, okay, I don't need to be in this folder anymore. Go back to the previous one. And you can use pushd as many times as you want. Okay, so you can pushd like 5 times, and then the popd will go back to the previous one. It's just like the back button of your browser. So every time.
CD dash works too.
Say again.
CD dash.
CD dash. Okay, so it's the same thing. You can pop back to the previous
CD
one.
dash will just pop back to whatever directory you were before.
But does it work in a nested way? You can
No,
do
I
it
don't
as
think so.
okay. This
I'm not
one,
sure about that, but-
yeah, this one can work as many levels as you want. So popd will now go back to the previous folder, which is where I started Eclipse, and now I can start Eclipse again.
If you did pushd here, without specifying directory, does it remember your previous pushd?
Yeah, pushd is nestable, which means if you use pushd, you can push several times. And let me show you
It's
how.
created a directory stack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Without
so-
specifying it. No. For example, Okay, now do a pop D, and then do a push D without any parameter. Will it go back to temp?
It doesn't let you do
Okay,
it.
well, after you pop it, it's gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, CD dash isn't nestable.
It's not nestable?
Not
So it's just a one level thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this one is nestable, which is kind of nice. And if you do a push D multiple times, there's a way to check, every time you push D, it actually shows you the entire path. So right now, it shows me that the current working directory or my user home folder is the most recent one. Temp is the second last one, and my last folder is that one. So it shows you the entire stack of folders, which is kind of handy.
Can you jump to, like, if you have like 5 of them pushed in there, can you jump to a particular one?
I believe so. You can pop multiple levels if you want.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you do a man pop D, okay, dash H. Okay, so that's what you can do. You can use pop D, and I think the dash N specifies, how many levels you want to pop at the same time.
Gotcha.
So in this case, so push D allows you to do about the same thing. You can you can basically use push D to push multiple levels.
When I pop multiple levels, I lose those levels.
There are no documentation, so that makes me believe push D and pop D are built into Bash itself, and that's why there are no man pages for push D and pop D. So that means if you do a man bash, then you can find pop D here. Yep, there we go.
Yes, a while ago there was a comment about team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well let's do that. So let me try this one. Let me see if I can pop 2 levels at a time. Yep. Nope. Okay, pop -2. Okay, now I'm back to here.
Maybe it's pop dash N, then number.
Oh, okay, so it's not dash number, but dash N and then with the number. Okay, so getting back to Eclipse, let's see how we can set up Git. So go to the project first, right click on the project, go to team, and click share project. So now it says configure Git repository. So that means I have to set up a repository first. Now if you don't have a Git server that you connect to, you can actually make it local as well. So there's no need to use a particular a particular server. If you have a server, that's even better. And we can click use or create repository in parent folder of project. So that would not be a bad idea if you have a local project. On the other hand, if your project is being shared with other people, that may or may not be a good thing to do. So we can pick use or create repository in parent folder of project.
Give you a little error. So just a little error.
And it's already done. Mine worked. I just created a repository now. So once you create a repository, we can make changes and then we can check it in. We can check in the changes. So if we go back to team, now we have all kinds of options opened up because the repository is already created. So now we can check in, we can check out, we can merge projects, and so on. Any questions? Let's go ahead and commit because commit is basically saying let's check in all the files. They're done for this particular revision. So it asks you to enter a comment, and we can just say this is a version where the model is almost implemented and it is partially tested. Okay? And obviously with the author, it's good to change it to actually use your name and also your email address. So I'm going to change it to And then the same thing for the committer. Basically, who says it's okay to put this file into the repository now? It's me. And now you can specify, which file do you want to commit into the repository. Some files you may or may not want to commit, such as the APK file itself, it's a binary file. Git can deal with it. It's just a matter of, do you want it to be a part of your project that you're tracking. But for certain, you want everything in classes, to be, checked in.
That's bin folder.
Sorry?
Yeah, that's bin folder. Binary.
Which one?
The one you're looking at right now.
Yeah, the dex file is binary, but you can check it into, you can also check in just the entire file. Let me see if I have a select all option here. Push is going to upload it. In other words, if you don't say commit and push, if you just say commit, you're just committing to the local repository. On the other hand, if your repository is connected to a remote server and you say commit and push, that means all your changes will now be made known to all the other developers using the same Git repository that is remote. So when those people say, I want to download the latest and greatest changes, they will be able to see your changes that you're committing at this time. Okay? Now this is a really good mechanism, because what it allows you to do is you can now control and say, well, I'm still working on my code. I'm not ready to release my code to the rest of the team. But yet, I want to create a checkpoint at this point. So later on, just for my own purposes, I want to be able to back up to this particular point. You can make that commitment local instead of pushing it to the remote server. So that way, you can basically say, okay, I just made a stupid mistake. I've made numerous stupid mistakes, and I want to back up to this particular version. You can do that with no implication to everybody else who's using the Git server. Now, at one point, let's say you're feeling really confident that your code is working fine and everybody else should be using your updated code, then you say commit and push. What that will do is, well, I haven't set it up yet to a remote server, but when you have push, it means all your changes will be updating the remote server. And at that point, if your team has 100 people, those people can now say, oh, I want to incorporate Tag's latest and greatest changes. And when they execute a get pull, P-U-L-L, then they will get all my latest and greatest changes. Am I making any sense? So that's why there are two commit buttons here. One is for a local commit where only you can see the changes. Okay, it's not released to anybody else. And then commit and push is almost like a release. It's saying, okay, now everybody else in the team can see it.
Walker, when you create a repository, do you specify a location for the repository?
I
Or
use
you
the
use
current folder.
Current folder.
I use the current folder, but only for the local repository. I did not set it up with a remote server, so
Yeah.
there's no way to really do any push because I don't have anything to push to.
Yeah, so when you do this commit and push, it's just updating your local copy, right?
I don't think this will work because I don't have a remote server to push to. See, I don't have a URI to
Okay.
specify yet, so that's why that part is not going to work.
GitHub or something.
Sorry?
GitHub.
Yeah, you can use GitHub. You can use a few other resources. SourceForge used to use CVS, not CVS, Subversion, SVN. I'm not sure whether they have now updated to also deal with Git. You can set up your own Git server too. I mean, it's not really that difficult to set up a Git server. I can set one up on the Power server, as a for student projects only. But what you need to do with the Git server is it has to have a URL so that people can find it, and it cannot. Well, it's better if you have a static IP. If it doesn't have a static IP, then you have to use some really tricky mechanism to go back to that server, when you have your IP address getting updated. GitHub may have requirements too. If you go to GitHub, it might have a requirement of what type of license you can use when you have your project hosted by GitHub. see. Oh, okay. Well, since they have updated plans, for money, so for a paid account, I think you can host any project without licensing requirements. Does anyone know whether they have free accounts for open source projects?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense to me. SourceForge is only for open source projects, and then some people use Google. What is the name of the Google repository?
Google Code.
Google Code. Yep. So Google Code is one, but many people are now transporting their project from Google Code back to SourceForge or GitHub.
GitHub's kind of the golden standard right now, I feel.
Okay, but there are still a lot of projects hosted by SourceForge. So SourceForge is probably the first, and then GitHub is the more commercialized version.
It is, but I think like Git in general is the more robust so far of the revision controls that I've seen so far.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know if that's true, but it just seems like from what I've seen so far.
Okay, that's fine. And this can be useful for even your homework assignments, not just for this class too. I mean, for all of your other classes, when you have to deal with projects that are a few hundred lines long, having revision control is going to be helpful. So, are there any questions about what we have gone through today? No questions? Okay, if there are no questions, I just have one last thing to talk about before we end today's class. I think the other one, the other screen recording part is pretty much done now because the captioner only works until 10:30, so that one should have concluded.
Are you on like a conference with somebody else?
Sorry?
Are you on a conference with somebody else?
No, I'm using CCC Confer to do closed captioning, so that whatever I'm recording is going to be closed captioned. There's actually a live person doing closed captioning with CCC Confer.
Okay.
Oh, okay. It's okay, Stacy. We are pretty much done for now, so you don't have to stick around. Thank you, though.
Who's Stacy?
She's the live captioner. All right.
You have to pay for that? Or you
No,
get service?
CCC Confer is interesting. It is actually a free service available to all. Well, CCC stands for California Community College. So that's why it's called CCC Confer. So somebody arranged a grant, a pretty large sum of money to use this engine for conferences, for classes, and also for online office hours. So it's a mechanism where you can log in using your computer, you can call in using a phone, and it will be able to with the phone obviously you cannot see what is happening, but you can listen to all the other people. You can have a phone conference using this engine. You can also have live. I can have live office hours online, and I can share screens. You can share your screen, and I can annotate on your screen and stuff like that. And that's why it's a useful resource. The reason why I have not used it extensively has to do with the audio encoding of CCC Confer is really fuzzy. Okay, it's not the quality is not nearly as good as what I use on YouTube. But because of the availability of a live captioner, it's quote unquote preferred, the preferred way of capturing lecture, especially when accessibility is an issue, when somebody needs closed captioning. Any other questions about the CCC Confer?
Are you doing this for a future, or is there someone that actually needs it?
I'm kind of testing it right now, to see how easy it is to use this particular mechanism for lecture recording. And I'm going to take a class later today. It's not a class; it's a seminar to learn other options of closed captioning. Because I was told that every video file that I upload to the server for students need to have closed captioning. Whether there is a student in the class who needs closed captioning or not is irrelevant. So that's what I was told.
and so I'm going to look into it.
Is that a law?
Yeah, it has to do with the ADA or the American Disability Act. Yep, go ahead.
What do you do with the caption file now?
The caption file?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean with a CCC confer?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Okay, it's made, but then what?
I think it is embedded into the video itself. I'm not sure whether I can download just the caption file, because a caption file has a particular format. It has a time code and the text next to it. So if I can download the caption file from CCC Confer, it's easy for me to merge that with the video that I'm uploading to YouTube.
Just do an offset for the timestamp.
Yeah, the timestamp will be close enough. I don't think it will be a real issue.
I think you can just tag it to say like offset of
Yep.
30 seconds or whatever,
Yep.
depending on when you started it.
Yep. So that's that's an option. That is an option.
So is she on here live, transcribing live, or what is she doing on here?
Right now she has left already.
What was she doing?
She was doing live captioning.
Which means
So
what?
so that means if someone is trying to watch this, remotely, in real time, that person can turn on your closed captioning, and they will be able to see what Stacy is typing.
So she's typing even if no one else is on there, right?
Correct. Because for the record, whatever is being recorded now is closed captioned. So if I have a student who needs closed captioning for disability purposes, that person can now watch the recorded version of this video and still be able to access the closed captioning.
That's got to be really confusing when people ask you questions and you don't repeat the question, and you go from talking about the class to a tangent about answering your question, and she's sitting there transcribing it.
Yep.
Or very technical terms, like she's gonna probably not quite get right.
Right, right. But it will fulfill the requirement, the ADA requirement.
As long as you don't get sued, it's okay.
The college does not get sued.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it time synced?
What do you mean
if
by?
you say something, will she sync it so that the
Well, let's take a look.
I was wondering.
Let's take a look, because I can stop the recorder now, so I can click this and stop the actual recorder.
I was wondering if you talk about a certain piece of code and then the text about what you're talking about is 5 minutes later, it might be confusing.
Oh yeah, it's going to be confusing either way. Okay, so it says select start sharing or switch modes. Okay, start sharing. Nope. I shared that already. So recording. Stop recording. Okay.
Wasn't there some paid part of CCC Confer? Like a pro version or something you pay for? Or is it all free?
No, it's all free. It's free to use for community colleges. The question now is, did I do something really, really stupid? Like not hitting the record button. It wouldn't be the first time. Okay, so let's click that.
That's alright, at least you took roll. At least you took roll.
Okay, so let's see. My Confer home, my meetings. It's also really slow to, from time to time. Okay, so here we have today's lecture. Add to calendar, meeting name. I want to find my recordings, archives. There we go. And you can actually view the archive from other colleges too. So the one from today is not there yet. Okay, let me see. Teach and confirm, that's the type. And hey, that's Michael. Michael Lestrange.
Do we have access to view these lectures?
You have to be able to sign in first. So I think you can sign in if you are a student. If you're using the email address that corresponds to a community college, I think you can sign. You can set up an account and be able to sign in. Now, whether you can do what I'm doing right now to view the archive of other classes from other colleges, I'm guessing you can, but I'm not 100% sure. I might have forgotten to press the record button, so that's why there's no actual recording in this case.
Well, go back to the application that you had.
My own application, or
The special application that you were
I
recording, because you
closed
did.
that. Oh,
That
you mean
one
this
right
one?
there. You did say stop,
I did say stop.
and it asked you, do you wish to stop this recording, or stop or pause this recording?
Okay. Let me close this.
Oh, don't close it yet? I'm just thinking if it's still saved on the system, closing out could possibly lose it.
No, it's probably going to stream directly, to the remote server. So if I did it right, it would have been recorded already remotely.
Did they provide you with any instructions?
Uh, I used to know how to do this. Okay, participant login, student login, student login. Okay, so this is a teach and confer. View archives. That should bring me back to the same page. Oh, I see what is going on. I think it's not available yet because of the time. Look at all the timestamp of these classes. They all start at 8 a.m. So I think it's kind of like they have a batch file of some kind, or they have to do some processing before they make a particular recording online.
I think that's the time that the class starts, because yours
Right.
started at 9 to 10:30.
Right. But you would imagine there are other classes that start at 9:30 as well. Well, we'll figure it out. At least my own recorder is actually still recording.
Oh, so you're doing 2 recordings?
I'm doing 2, just to be sure.
Very cool.
I learned my mistakes.
You just like dump all the previous recordings on them. Like, there you go.
I don't think they will.
Get chicken.
I don't think they will do it because then they're doing
2 years worth of
yeah,
recordings.
2 years worth of
What you wanted
recordings,
captioned?
640 minutes per week, right? Yep, it's still recording right now, so I can stop my own recorder